Mike Johnson wondered what he would find when he finally reached the home he shared with his wife, Amy, a woman he had not heard from for over a year, even though she knew where he was. As he stared out the window of the cab, he thought back over his life. He lost both his parents at the age of 17 in a tragic auto accident and became an emancipated minor with the support of his next-door neighbor, who happened to be a county social worker. Fortunately, his parents had set up a trust fund to make sure he was well taken care of. It wasn't a huge amount of money, but it was enough to take care of his needs. He was also in great physical shape and played football in high school. He was popular with his classmates because he had his own house, which was paid for with his inheritance, and he was considered to be an all-around nice guy. His father taught him to be a gentleman to the ladies and how to control his temper. When he died, he was a hand-to-hand combat instructor and had taught Mike well. He graduated high school and went to college at the University of Florida. In his third year of college, he met Amy, who was in her second year. They dated a few times, but he felt like something was missing, so he didn't call her after their third date. About 2 weeks later, she called. "Hey, Mike," she said. "What's going on? I haven't heard from you for a while. Is something wrong?" "I don't know, Amy," he said. "I just don't think we're a good fit." "Why no?" "That's not true, Mike," she said, disappointed. "I think we're a great fit. Please, can we try again?" "Okay, let me think about it," he said. A week later, he asked her out again. They continued dating until he graduated with a degree in economics. As they celebrated his graduation that night, he asked her to marry him and she said yes. The wedding was set to take place after her graduation. He stayed in the area so he could remain close to Amy and got a job with a local investment firm. They married in March 2001. At the time, he was 22 and Amy was 21. Things were going great for them, but the world changed that September. On September 12, 2001, he joined the Army. Thanks to his father's training and his constant practice of martial arts, he became a ranger. During this time, they made a great couple and were happy newlyweds. He kept the house he had inherited from his parents in Columbus, and the two stayed there. Amy was able to get a job as a paralegal in town. By the time his training was complete, the U.S. was heavily involved in Iraq, and he was shipped off for a 12-month tour. A month into that tour, he was promoted and given more responsibilities. After that tour, he came home, but 9 months later was ordered to Iraq for another 12-month tour. By now, he had re-enlisted and was promised a duty station of his choice upon returning from Iraq. Predictably, Amy wasn't happy. "Why do you have to go back?" she asked. "I need you here with me." "I'm sorry," he said. "I've been given orders. I want to stay here with you too, but I don't have a choice in the matter." He held her as she cried into his shoulder. "After this tour, I'm supposed to be able to choose my next assignment," he told her, hoping it was a promise he would be able to keep. They spent quality time together until he had to leave. For the first month of his second tour, he received frequent letters from Amy. He called when he could and always wrote back. But after that first month, the communication dwindled. He received only one letter in the next 6 months and had only been able to talk to her twice on the phone. What was going on, he wondered. After nearly 8 months with virtually no contact from Amy, he was worried but couldn't do anything about it, so he did what many others did and counted the days until his tour was finished. On a Tuesday morning, his Humvee hit an ID, injuring several soldiers in the vehicle. As a result of the blast, he lost his lower left leg. 3 hours after the attack, a helicopter was able to land and evacuate all the casualties. They patched his leg up as best they could and sent him to Ramstein, Germany for more surgeries and rehabilitation. After spending 3 months in Germany, he was shipped to Walter Reed Hospital for additional treatment and to learn to walk with his prosthetic limb. It took an extra 2 months to learn how to walk with his prosthetic. Afterward, he was given a medical discharge and released to go home. Despite his best efforts, he heard nothing from his wife. By now, it had been more than a year since he had any contact with her at all. Was she even alive? He asked himself. And if she was, why didn't she contact him? He had tried calling her parents, but wasn't able to get any answers. He called his home and left messages. At least he still had power at his house, so someone must be there. It was about 9:30 a.m. when the taxi pulled up in front of the house where they lived. His truck was still in the driveway along with her car. He also noticed several other cars parked along the curb. The cab driver helped him carry his bag to the door after he extracted his large 6-foot 2-inch frame out of the small car. He heard noises from the front room and wondered what was going on. He carefully opened the door and walked into the living room, where he got the shock of his life. Amy laid on the floor shocked when she noticed Mike standing there, but he looked different. "I don't know who you are, but I suggest you leave right now," Mike sternly ordered. The men quickly scrambled and fled. Amy approached Mike, attempting to reach for him, but he backed away. "Keep your hands off me," he said. "You have 10 minutes to pack up and get out." Amy begged for forgiveness, trying to explain that it was a mistake and it didn't mean anything. However, Mike wasn't convinced. "I haven't heard from you in months. And now this? It's over," he stated firmly. "Just tell me where you're staying so I'll know where to send the divorce papers. Please, Mike, you have to believe me. This is the only time it's happened." "It was a terrible mistake," she pleaded. Mike, however, wasn't willing to listen. "I haven't heard anything from you for over a year, and now I come home to find you betraying our marriage." "Get out of my house," he said. Feeling angry and hurt, Mike decided to take some action. He went to their bedroom and threw her clothes out of the window. He canceled their joint accounts and took back the house key. He decided to burn her clothes and belongings in the yard. "What are you doing?" Amy asked, scared. "You have 10 minutes to pack your things and leave before I burn everything," he declared. "Now hurry up." Amy rushed around the house, grabbing her belongings. Mike watched the time on his watch. Once she had everything, just as Mike was about to follow through with his plan, Amy begged him to reconsider. "Where will I go?" she asked tearfully. "I don't care right now," he replied. "As far as I'm concerned, you can go to heck. Just tell me where you're staying so I'll know where to send the divorce papers." Amy left the house in tears, and Mike, emotionally drained, collapsed on the couch, reflecting on what had just happened. He couldn't believe how much Amy had betrayed their marriage and him. Lost in his thoughts, he didn't realize that several hours had passed when the phone rang. "Hello," he said, answering the phone. "Mike, what on earth happened?" asked an angry voice. He recognized it as Julie, Amy's older sister. "Ask Amy," he replied. "She can give you the explanation." "I did ask her," Julie said. "She said you kicked her out without any reason." "That's not true, Julie, and you know it," Mike said. "If you want to hear the truth, come by my house and I'll show you." There was silence on the other end before she responded. "Okay, Mike. I'll come over, but this had better be a good explanation," Julie said before hanging up. Realizing he had time before Julie arrived, Mike turned on his computer and decided to check Amy's emails. Amy wasn't very careful with passwords, and she had a web-based email service, so it didn't take long for Mike to gain access. He changed her password temporarily to buy him some time to gather evidence before she would notice something was wrong. As he browsed through her emails, he discovered a disturbing pattern of infidelity that had been ongoing for a long time, possibly during his entire tour in Iraq. After Julie arrived, he showed her the evidence he had gathered. She was shocked as she looked at the photos he shared with her. "Oh my goodness," she exclaimed. "There's more," he said, throwing down the pictures he had taken from Amy's email. Julie looked through the photos, shocked. "Did you know about all this?" She shook her head. "The absolute truth," Julie said. "I had no idea. I knew she was going out a lot, but I didn't know about this." "She never said anything to you?" Mike asked. Julie shook her head. "No, nothing." "Oh my goodness, Mike, I'm so sorry," she said. "I knew she was upset about you leaving, but I didn't think she'd do this." "Did she say anything to you about me being injured?" he asked. Julie shook her head. "Injured?" Julie asked, surprised. "When did you get injured?" "About 6 months ago," he said. "Lost part of a leg. I've been in surgery and rehabilitation for months, and I never heard anything from her. Now I know why." "I'm sorry, Mike, she never said anything about it. She's hardly mentioned you at all over the last several months," Julie said. "Probably too busy having relations to even give a care," he said. "She didn't even recognize me when I came in the door. So what are you going to do?" Julie asked. "I'm divorcing her," Mike said. "Is there any way you can forgive her and work past this?" Julie asked. "You gotta be kidding me," Mike said. "There's no way I can ever get past this. And something tells me I'm just scratching the surface." "No, we're finished." "I understand, Mike. I'm really very sorry about all this," she said. "I'm going to give her a piece of my mind when I see her." She wrapped her arms around him. "If there's anything I can ever do, let me know." "Okay," she asked before leaving. "Thanks, Julie. I appreciate that," he said. He locked the door after she left and went back to the computer to see what else he could uncover. Looking at the timeline, he could see that Amy's cheating had begun early in his first tour in Iraq and had been happening about once a week the whole time he was gone. He also managed to identify all 6 men involved in her secret activities. He also learned that all of them were serving in the military. Based on what? They wrote, he was able to identify the units they belonged to and got an idea of the days they went out socializing. Additionally, he found that all 6 of the men Amy had been involved with were married and a couple of them had young children. He made a note of their addresses and contact information. He regretted that they would be hurt in all this, but he wasn't going to let them off the hook just because they had children. He filed that information away and laid down on the futon in his office to get a few hours of sleep. The next day would be very busy. He woke up before the sun came up the next day and did his morning routine. Getting dressed, he planned out the day's activities. First on his list was to get an appointment with a good divorce attorney. He looked through the phone book and started making calls. After speaking to a couple of firms, he was able to get an appointment that morning. Looking at his watch, he realized he didn't have a lot of time before the appointment, so he went to the bank and closed out their joint accounts and reopened an account in his name only. He knew he would probably have to give her half of their money, so he got a cashier's check for the full amount. His inheritance and trust fund were in accounts that Amy had no access to, so he left those alone. He closed out their joint credit card and applied for one in his name only, paying off the balance on the other card. Once done, he headed out to see his attorney. He walked in, carrying a folder full of emails and photos, and checked in with the receptionist. He had just poured a cup of coffee when an attractive woman came out from the back and introduced herself. "Mr. Johnson?" she asked, extending her hand. He shook her hand and introduced himself. "Please call me Mike," he said. She smiled and ushered him into her office. "Thank you, Mike," she said. "Please call me Sally. I understand you are seeking a divorce. Is that right?" "Yes, it is," he said. She looked at him intently for a few minutes. "You know, I don't represent cheating spouses," she said. Mike put the folder on her desk. "Sally, I've been in Iraq and in the hospital recovering from combat wounds for several months," he said. "I'm not the one cheating, as these emails and photos show." She looked at the folder, picked it up and thumbed through the thick pile of papers, shaking her head. "Oh my," she said. "This is extremely incriminating. How did you get these emails and photos?" "Well," Mike said, "my soon-to-be ex-wife used my computer for her correspondence, and they like to send photos and video back and forth." "You have video as well?" she asked. "Yes, I do," Mike said, "and I came home to this yesterday." He pulled out his phone and showed her the photos he took in his house. Her eyes grew wide. They went over the evidence and the details of the divorce, and by the time the meeting was over, Sally agreed to file for divorce on the grounds of adultery, naming the 6 men she had been involved with for the last 2 years. "So once we file, we'll get her served and she'll have 30 days to respond," Sally said. "If she doesn't respond, we can have the final decree granted immediately. If she does contest it, it may take a bit longer. Since you owned the house before you got married, she has no claim on it. The same for your inheritance and your trust fund. If she wants to fight it, we can use the photos and video. Hopefully she'll simply sign the papers and it'll be a done deal. We can have her served either at her workplace or at her sister's apartment if she's still there in a couple of days." "That would be great," Mike said. He thanked her and left the office, feeling better since he first got home the previous day. After he got home, he called a locksmith to have the locks changed on the house and began calling the wives of the men Amy had been involved with. Needless to say, they were all angry. Most of them had suspected something was going on but didn't know what. They all asked for evidence, and Paul was more than happy to email photos and videos along with copies of some of their emails. He made a few more calls and met some of his comrades at a bar on the edge of town. They looked at some of the photos he brought and shook their heads. They also knew the 6 men involved and discussed possible options. As they talked, one of the 6, a big clod named John Abrams, came stumbling into the bar. George, one of Mike's friends, pointed him out. They looked and turned back to their drinks, but not before the jerk recognized Mike and staggered over to him, full of attitude. Well, he said loudly, "if it ain't SGT. Johnson, how's your wife these days? She's still interested in me?" he asked, grabbing his crotch. Mike said nothing, prompting the jerk to push the issue. "What? Are you a wimp as well as someone whose spouse cheated? Simon, big ranger dude, let's see what you've got." He made the mistake of taking a swing at Mike, his fist barely touching Mike's head. Mike responded, putting the jerk down on the floor in seconds without breaking a sweat. Red with anger, he began hitting the man's face, breaking his nose and knocking out a few teeth. The next thing Mike knew, he was being pulled off the man by 2 police officers who put handcuffs on him and placed him in the back of a police car. The other man was loaded into an ambulance and taken to an emergency room. Mike spent a few hours in jail before an officer came to his holding cell, waving him out. "Today's your lucky day, soldier," the officer said. "Witnesses said you acted in self-defense and surveillance video proved it, so you get to go home tonight with no charges." Mike went home and went to sleep. The next day, he got a call from one of his friends. "Hey, did you see the news?" George asked. "No, I just got up," Mike said. "What's up?" "Seems there was a rash of muggings last night," George said. 5 soldiers ended up in the hospital with various injuries. It's in the paper. Isn't that a shame?" "Yeah, that's terrible news," Mike said sarcastically. "Anyone we know?" "Yeah, they just so happened to be the other 5 guys hanging out with Amy," George said. "Isn't that quite a coincidence?" "Yeah, that is quite a coincidence," Mike said, smiling. Later that day, Mike got a visit from his former regimental commander and the sergeant major, a man who made Sam Elliott's character in We Were Soldiers look downright friendly by comparison. He opened the door and invited them in, offering them something to drink. "No, thanks," Sergeant the Colonel said. "We just wanted to stop by for a few minutes to see how things are going." "Could be better, all things considered," Colonel Mike said. "And please call me Mike. I'm not a soldier anymore, thanks to this," he added, tapping on his prosthetic leg. "I understand, and I do apologize," the Colonel said. "Not your fault," Colonel Mike said. "You didn't cause that eye to explode." They all laughed at that. "I understand you're going through a divorce," the Colonel said. "I got a call from your lawyer who said your wife's been involved with 6 active duty soldiers." "That's right," Colonel Mike said. "I have names, addresses, you name it. You want them?" "Yes, Mike, that would be helpful," the Colonel said. Mike went into his office and brought out a folder. He handed the Colonel a sheet with the men's names and addresses. "Would you like pictures as well?" Mike asked. "I have pictures, video, you name it." Seems they got a kick out of emailing this stuff back and forth to each other. "And yes, they knew she was my wife. They deliberately did it while I was overseas in a combat zone, and yes, they're all married." "You've done your homework," I see, the Colonel said. "Yes, they deserve to be held accountable for their actions. I'll take a look at this and push it through the appropriate channels to see what can be done. If they agree, I think we can make a case to have them all dishonorably discharged." "Also," Colonel Mike said, "one of them attacked me last night in a public bar. He ended up in the hospital." The Colonel nodded his head. "Personally, that's not surprising, but officially you didn't hear that from me," he said, smiling. "So what are your plans for the future?" "Well, Colonel, I haven't had much time to think about that," Mike said. "I have an economics degree, but I don't think I'd ever be happy working a desk job again." The Colonel smiled. "Why didn't you go for OC?" he asked. "With your record, you would have had a good chance. My dad was an NCO, and I always wanted to be where action was," Mike said. The Colonel nodded his head and the SGT Maj smiled. "I knew your dad when he was a hand-to-hand combat instructor," the Colonel said. "He was a damn good man. I know he'd be proud of you no matter what you decide to do." He stood and put his hat back on. The SGT Maj joined him. He extended his hand and Mike shook it. "You take care of yourself, Sergeant," he said. "If there's anything I can do, let me know." Mike nodded his head. "Thank you, Colonel, SGT Maj," he said. He watched as the 2 men left. Mike spent the day puttering around the house, doing mostly busy work, just stuff to keep him from thinking about Amy. That evening, he popped open a soda and spent the night watching television, his mind wandering over his failed marriage. The next day, he got a call from someone at Amy's place of work, telling him that she had been served with divorce papers. "Is it true?" the female voice asked. Mike knew the voice. It was Amanda, one of Amy's friends at the law firm where she worked. He always thought she was quite attractive and had a nice sense of style, but he never said anything. "Is what true?" Mike asked. "That she cheated on you while you were in Iraq," Amanda said. "The process server was very clear that she was being divorced for adultery. We all heard him." "Yeah, it's true," Mike said. "It's been going on for over 2 years. And you never knew?" Amanda asked. "She only did it while I was deployed to Iraq," Mike told her. "Oh my gosh, you poor man," Amanda said. "I'm so sorry." "Well, listen, if there's anything we can do for you, just call, okay? I mean it. We think highly of you and we hate what she did to you." "Thanks, Amanda. I appreciate that," Mike said. Later that day, he got a call from Linda Abrams, John Abrams' wife. "Hey, Mike," she said, "you have a few minutes to talk?" "Yeah, sure," Mike said. "What's up?" "Well, I learned about what my jerk of a husband did to you and Amy, and I'd like to get some revenge if you're up for it," she said. Mike smiled. He knew Linda. and thought she was a kind and beautiful woman. He couldn't understand why John would betray her. He listened to her plan and had to smile. This would be fun, he thought. "When do you want to do this?" he asked. "Tonight, if you're free," she said. "I'd like you to come by about 4:30 or 5 this evening so I can feed you dinner first and get everything set up." "You're on," Mike said. "I'll see you this evening." A bit later, he got another call, this time from Amy. "Mike," she sobbed, "I got served with divorce papers today. Can't we work through this? I told you it was only the one time and it was an accident." Mike laughed. "You stupid person," he growled. "I happen to know that it was much more than a one-time thing. Just sign the papers and it'll be over in a month. Otherwise, it may become very public, and you don't want that." "Darn you," she said, her tone changing. "I'll fight you every step of the way. I'll take your house and everything you own." "I don't think so," he said. "Call my lawyer, then sign the papers." He hung up and blocked her number. That afternoon, he went to Linda's house and parked in the middle of their driveway just as she suggested. He knocked on the door and she opened it wearing a casual, ripped t-shirt and a tiny pair of ripped shorts that showed off her style. Her top accentuated her figure and her energy seemed contagious. She hugged Mike and smiled, giving him a friendly hug. "Like what you see, soldier?" she asked playfully. "Of course," Mike said. "You're beautiful. John made a terrible mistake by cheating on you." "Yes, he did," she said, "and he's going to regret it. Come on in. I have dinner cooked up." Mike entered the house and smelled the delicious aroma of chicken fried steak. His mouth watered as he thought about what was about to happen. "This is delicious," Mike said as he finished the meal she dished out to him. "Just wait till we have dessert," she said. Grabbing his hand, she took him upstairs. Linda had set up a chair in the bedroom position just right and put Mike behind the door. She had a pile of zip ties and a couple rolls of tape on the dresser. After they went over their plan, they heard the front door open. "I'm home," John shouted from the front room. "Whose truck is that in the driveway? I can't get in the garage." "I'm sorry," Linda said. "I asked Mike Johnson to come over and give me a hand with something that broke and I didn't want to bother you at work. Could you please come upstairs? We could use your help." "Mike Johnson?" he asked as he came up the stairs. "Why did you call him?" "Oh, no reason, really, I just thought he could help." "You don't mind, do you?" she asked. "No, I guess not," he said, following her into the bedroom. As soon as he entered the room, Mike slammed the door shut and punched him in the throat. He followed that up with a punch to the gut. John didn't know what hit him, and by the time he could react, Mike and Linda had him in the chair and zip-tied to the legs. His arms were also zip-tied to the chair. "What the heck is going on?" he yelled when he was able to catch his breath. Linda stood in front of him, her hands on her hips. "I learned that you and your buddies have been messing around with Amy Johnson for the last 2 years or more." "Jerk," she said. "I also know all about your attack on Mike at the bar the other night. So I decided to get some revenge." "Please, Linda, don't do this," John begged. "Shut up, jerk," she said. "I'm just getting started." She kicked off her tennis shoes. "Linda, no, don't," John begged, shaking his head. "Why not, jerk?" she asked. "You've been messing around on me for years while I've been taking care of you, cleaning the house, washing your dirty laundry, and cooking for you while working a part-time job. All that time, I've been faithful to you, and this is how you repay me. Forget it. Don't make me tape your mouth shut." "You've been served, jerk," she said. "Now get your stuff and get out of here. I've already got it packed up for you. There's also a restraining order, and you'd better follow it, otherwise I'll have your backside thrown in jail. Got it?" John nodded his head quietly and took his duffel bag and the suitcase Linda had prepared. Defeated, he left the house. After John left, Linda buried her head in Mike's shoulder and cried. He held her, hugged her. "It'll be all right," he said. She nodded her head. "It won't be easy, but I'll manage," she said. "I've already split our accounts, and with my job I'll be able to cover the bills for a little while, but I'm eventually going to have to sell the house." "Linda, if it comes to that, you can come stay with me," Mike said. She nodded her head. "Thanks, Mike, I appreciate that," she said. "Please stay here with me tonight," she begged. Mike agreed, and the two spent time together well into the morning. Things didn't go well with the divorce at first. Amy decided to fight it, claiming that her 6-man gathering was just a one-time thing. After a little more than 6 weeks, Sally called for a conference with Mike, Amy, and her attorney, Bill Green. They gathered in a conference room at Sally's office, and Amy's attorney started speaking right away, suggesting the two go to counseling to help Mike get past what he called Amy's one-time mistake. Sally shook her head and stopped Amy's attorney. She pulled out a stack of emails and photos and placed them on the table. Amy and her attorney looked at the pile of paper, shocked. "Look," Bill, Sally said. "Let's cut through the nonsense, okay? My client has evidence in your client's own words, photos, and videos of multiple gatherings with the same 6 men going back over 2 years. By our estimate, your client has done this over 100 times while her husband was away. I've seen your client's sworn response, and I want to warn you that if you persist in this, we'll have no choice but to pursue charges of dishonesty against your client and ask for the maximum sentence of 10 years in prison. Now, if you decide to withdraw your response and have your client sign Mr. Johnson's initial proposal, we'll forget about the dishonesty. What's your decision?" "Look, Sally," Bill said, "you know as well as I do that it's rare for criminal prosecution for dishonesty in divorce cases. Your threats won't work here." "Do you really want to take that chance, Bill?" Sally asked. "It may be rare, but it does happen. And with the proof we have, I think a judge would see it our way." Bill shook his head. Mike leaned over to Sally and whispered something in her ear. She nodded her head before speaking. "Why don't we do this?" Sally said. "My client says he'd like to speak with Amy for a few minutes alone. He assures me he won't get out of line. I suggest we let them have this time to work things out." Bill listened as Amy spoke to him quietly. After she finished, he nodded his head. "Okay," he said, "but we'll be right outside the door." After they left, Amy looked at Mike. "All right, what are you planning?" she said defiantly. Mike picked up the stack of emails and photos and began showing the photos to her. Her eyes widened as he did so. Then he pulled out a photo of her from his wallet. "Do you know what got me through those 2 tours in Iraq?" he asked. He pointed at his photo, now yellow with age. It had been taken shortly before he enlisted. "This. And then when I didn't hear anything from you, I began thinking the worst. I honestly thought you had gotten hurt or worse. Then when I came home and found you involved with those 6 guys, but I nearly lost it. You can imagine how I felt when I looked in your email and found all this. You might as well have put a bullet in my head. At least that would have been more merciful." Amy began tearing up as he talked. But he wasn't finished. He showed her an email he had printed. He began reading the thread. "Yes, you were," she said through her tears. "I just missed you so much, and then when I met the guys at the club, they made me feel good, and I forgot about how much I missed you." "Well, you just messed up 7 families counting ours. Do you know that?" he asked. "You didn't just ruin our family, you destroyed theirs as well. Some of those guys had children. Did you know that?" She shook her head. "No, I didn't," she said. "What did you think was going to happen when I got back? Clap my hands and brag about what a promiscuous person you are?" he asked. She was sobbing by now. "I'm sorry," she said through her tears. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "Well, you did," he said. "Look, I happen to know the girls in your office can't stand you and hate what you did. I also know the 6 guys are all getting divorced and are facing discharge from the Army. I happen to know they're all going to be getting other than honorable discharges, which is something that'll follow them their entire lives. On top of that, there's 6 very angry spouses out there who also hate you." He put the papers back in a stack before looking at her. "You know very well that Sally will press formal charges of dishonesty against you. In this state, you can get up to 10 years in prison for that," he said. "And you'll probably never work in a law firm again. Even if you do get off easy, you'll probably have to spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. Believe me, those spouses are very angry with you right now and would probably love to do to you what was done to their husbands." She looked at him in shock. "What are you saying, Mike?" she asked. "Are you threatening me? Did you have something to do with those guys getting attacked?" "No, the only one I faced was that jerk John when he wanted to rub it in my face. And that was after he took a swing at me," Mike said. "I'm not threatening you at all, just letting you know the situation. Look, just sign the papers and end this. Now, can we ever be friends?" she asked. Mike shook his head. "I don't think so," he said. "After what you've done, it'll be a long time before I can stand to be around you." She wiped her eyes after he spoke. She looked down, defeated. "Okay," she said quietly. Mike stood up and opened the door, letting the lawyers back in. "Well, have we come to an agreement?" Bill asked. Amy nodded her head. "Yes," she said. She looked at Sally. "I've decided that I don't want any financial support. Mike only gets a small pension from the Army, and he needs that. I make enough to support myself. I just want to finish this." Mike was shocked. He wasn't expecting this. Sally nodded her head. Okay, she said. Let me make this one change, and I'll need you to initial it. Bill looked at Amy, surprised. Are you sure about this? He asked. Did he threaten you with something? No, Bill, she said. I just want this over with. Sally came back with the amended paperwork and an assistant who happened to be a notary. Mike and Amy signed every place they were told to. She began sobbing when she signed the line that said she had to revert to her maiden name. After they were finished, Mike held out his hand. Tearfully, Amy took off her rings and handed them to him. He took off his wedding ring and handed it to her. Maybe you can be faithful to the next man you decide to marry, he said. There's still a few of your things at the house. If you want, I'll bring them by Saturday. That would be fine, Amy said. Thanks. Thanks. Sally and Bill stood up and shook hands. I'll withdraw my client's response and meet you at the courthouse to file this today, he said. Sally nodded her head. I'll see you there, she said. Bill and Amy left the room, and Mike collapsed in his chair, exhausted yet relieved that the ordeal was finally over. Sally lingered for a moment, her gaze fixed on him with a mixture of curiosity and concern. What did you tell her? Really, she inquired, breaking the silence that had settled in the room. Mike met her gaze, his expression solemn yet resolute. I just reminded her of the truth, he replied, his voice steady, and of the consequences of her actions. There's 7 families out there, shattered because of this mess. Sally nodded, her face softening. That's why I never represent dishonest people, she declared, her tone imbued with conviction. You're a good person, Mike Johnson. You've got a strong moral compass. You'll do well in this world. Just stay out of trouble, okay? She offered him a supportive smile. Mike returned the smile, feeling a sense of warmth and appreciation for her encouragement. I will, Sally, he assured her. Thanks for everything. With that, he left the office, his steps feeling lighter than they had in weeks. As he made his way home, he couldn't help but reflect on the tumultuous events that had led to this moment. He stopped briefly to grab a 6-pack of soda, planning to celebrate the end of a challenging chapter in his life. Dialing Linda's number, he shared the good news with her. Come on over to the house tonight, she suggested, her voice brimming with excitement. And we'll celebrate together, you got it, he agreed, his spirits lifted by the prospect of spending the evening with her. That Saturday, Mike found himself packing up the last few belongings of Amy's that had remained scattered around his place. He drove to her sister's apartment, where Amy had been staying temporarily. Julie, Amy's sister, greeted him at the door. Hi, Mike, she greeted him, albeit with a hint of surprise. I brought the rest of Amy's things over, he explained, handing over the box of belongings. Well, the next time I see her, I'll get an address and send it, Julie responded, her tone somewhat distant. What do you mean? Mike asked, puzzled by her remark. Amy left, Julie disclosed, her voice low. She quit her job the day you guys finalized your papers and left that night. Just packed up her stuff and took off. I don't know where she's headed, but I think she's leaving the state. Mike said, processing the news. Well, if you talk to her, tell her I dropped this off. Julie took the box, offering a word of thanks. Epilogue. In the unfolding weeks after the tumultuous events, Julie reached out to Mike with an update that Amy had indeed made a significant life change, fleeing across the country to find solace in either the lush landscapes of Washington or the expansive natural beauty of Oregon. The 6 men who had played roles in the upheaval of Mike's personal life had also faced the consequences of their actions, receiving discharges from their military positions that were marked as other than honorable. Like shadows dissolving into the night, they too had vanished, leaving no trace of their subsequent whereabouts. Though curiosity occasionally nudged at Mike's thoughts, pondering if their paths might ever intersect with Amy's again, he realized that such questions no longer held any sway over his emotions or interest. Life, as it often does, moved forward and brought with it a series of unexpected blessings for Mike. In a twist of fate, he and Linda, who had both found solace and understanding in each other's company amidst their personal storms, decided to join their lives together in marriage. Their relationship, sparked under the most unconventional circumstances, quickly blossomed into a deep and abiding love. The initial celebration of their union soon led to the joyous news of Linda's pregnancy, and before long they had welcomed not 1, but 2 additional children into their growing family. Their home became a hub of laughter, love, and the kind of chaos that brings warmth to the heart. Professionally, Mike embarked on a new chapter that was as unexpected as it was rewarding. He accepted a position as a researcher with the Homefront Security Task Force, an organization dedicated to the safety and security of the nation. This role not only came with a generous salary and comprehensive benefits package, but also granted Mike access to a world of sensitive information that piqued his natural curiosity and drive for knowledge. The flexibility of working from home was an added advantage, affording him the precious ability to spend more time with his family. Nevertheless, his responsibilities occasionally required him to travel to a mysterious and closely guarded location known colloquially among his colleagues as Fort Apache. This secretive aspect of his job added a layer of intrigue and excitement to his work, challenging him in ways he had never anticipated. Through it all, Mike's journey from the depths of betrayal and heartache to the heights of personal and professional fulfillment was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. With Linda by his side, a loving family that continued to grow, and a career that both challenged and fulfilled him, Mike's life had transformed in ways he could hardly have imagined in those dark days of the past. The road had not been easy, but it had led him to a place of peace, happiness, and a future brimming with possibilities. One day, as he sifted through the day's mail, a thick envelope caught his eye. Before he could examine its contents, his work phone rang. Mike Johnson, he answered promptly. The voice on the other end belonged to Oscar, a colleague whose camaraderie Mike had come to value. "Hey Mike, how's everything?" Oscar inquired, his tone casual yet sincere. "Going great, Oscar. How about yourself?" Mike responded, genuinely interested. "Living the dream," Oscar quipped. "Listen, I wanted to personally thank you for your outstanding work on the Skaggs case. It was invaluable." Mike felt a surge of pride at the acknowledgement. "Thanks," he said, appreciating the rare recognition. Oscar continued, "Bill insisted I make sure you received those tickets to Cancun. Recognition in our field is scarce, but you really earned it." "I just got them today," Mike confirmed, a smile spreading across his face. "Good," Oscar said. "Make sure you and that lovely wife of yours enjoy yourselves." "You deserve it," with a grateful heart, Mike hung up.